lecture, we are going to be looking at standard costing. So firstly, what is a standard cost? It is a predetermined target cost that should be achieved under efficient operating conditions. So if it is a predetermined target cost, that means it's set up front. So let's say, for example, the company determines all of their standards up front at the beginning of the year, and it is a target that they should be able to achieve under efficient operating conditions. Now, it's important to note that standard costs are not the same as budgeted costs. The standard cost gives you the cost per unit, and the budgeted cost is the cost in total. So let's say, for example, we have a standard cost of 10 Rand per unit, and budgeted output is 20,000 units. So the standard cost is the cost per unit of 10 Rand, and the budgeted cost is the cost in total. So in other words, 10 Rand per unit multiplied by 20,000 units, we have a budgeted cost of 200,000 Rand. Now, what types of organizations will benefit from using standard costing? It's important to note that their activities should consist of standardized tasks or repetitive operations, and that's so that standards can be set. So you need to be able to determine exactly how many labor hours are required to make one product, exactly how many machine hours are required, exactly how much raw material is required. So in order to determine or to set standards, we need standardized tasks and repetitive operations. So standard costing is best suited to organizations that are involved in mass production. You have repetitive operations and you can set standards. On the other hand, if we have a company that makes unique products according to customer requirements, then you won't be able to set standards because every product is going to require a different number of labor hours, a different number of machine hours, a different amount of material, for example. So it won't be suited to companies that produce unique products according to customer requirements. So you can see that standard costing cannot be applied to activities of a non-repetitive nature because there is no basis for observing repetitive operations, and consequently, standards cannot be set. All right, you can then read through the next section on your own. It's very straightforward. It deals with the two approaches that can be used in order to establish standards. Then I've included an example of a standard cost card. So for every product that a company manufactures, they should maintain a standard cost card. And in this example, I'm assuming that absorption costing is used. So remember, if absorption costing is used, that means that fixed costs or fixed manufacturing costs are included in the value of inventory. So you'll see with this standard cost card, we are looking at product XYZ, and we include direct material, direct labor, variable overheads, and also fixed overheads. Now, it's important to note, obviously, if the company was using variable costing, then only variable manufacturing costs would be included in the value of inventory, and the fixed overheads would not be included on this standard cost card. All right, now let's just look at this in a little bit more detail. So what the standard cost card tells us is what the cost per unit should be for each product that's manufactured. And you can see exactly what goes into the calculation of that unit cost. First, we have direct material. And in order to manufacture one product of XYZ, they require 2 liters of direct material, and the cost is 46 Rand per liter. So that gives you a unit cost of 92 Rand. Now, it's important to note sometimes this information won't be provided in such detail, and you might be required to work backwards and calculate certain inputs. So let's say, for example, they don't give you the cost per liter of 46 Rand. They just tell you that the unit cost is 92 Rand and you require 2 liters of material in order to make one product. Then obviously you can calculate the cost per liter by taking the unit cost and dividing by the number of liters. On the other hand, if they don't give you the number of liters, you can calculate the number of liters by taking the unit cost and dividing by the cost per liter, and then you'll get the number of liters. So just make sure that you understand the relationship between all of the costs, and you can work backwards to calculate any missing information that you might need. All right, so that deals with your standard cost card. Then, What are the aims of a standard costing system? So firstly, guys, standard costing can be used for control, or it can also be used for inventory valuation. So let's first talk about control in a bit more detail. With control, we can compare the actual results to the standard costs, and we can calculate variances, which can then be analyzed in detail, and then costs can be controlled more effectively. So in other words, standard costing can be used to calculate variances so that costs can be controlled. In addition to that, standard costing can also be used for inventory valuation, because if you refer to IAS 2, inventories can be valued at standard cost if the results approximate actual costs. So as long as the standard costs approximate actual costs, you can value inventory at standard costs. Now, it's important to note that the standards must be continuously reviewed and updated to reflect current conditions. And that's obviously, let's first discuss control. If we are calculating variances and we are comparing actual results to standards, if the standards are outdated, you're going to have a lot of meaningless variances. So if you want this to actually provide you with meaningful information, you need to be comparing actual results to updated standards. Then obviously when it comes to inventory valuation, inventory can only be valued at standard cost if the standard cost approximates the actual cost. So you can't use standard costs that were established 3 years ago and are outdated, because then it won't approximate the actual cost. So it's very important for both control and for inventory valuation that standards are continuously reviewed and updated. Now, it's also important to note, guys, that it's possible for a company to still value their inventory at actual cost. So, for example, they might value their inventory using the first in, first out method or the weighted average method. They don't value their inventory at standard cost, but they only use standard costing for control purposes, or in other words, for variance analysis. So the company might decide they are not going to value their inventory at standard cost. They're going to value their inventory at actual cost using the FIFO or weighted average method, and they're only going to use standard costing in order to calculate variances, so for control purposes. However, it's obviously also possible that they decide to value their inventory at standard cost and also use standard costing for control purposes to calculate variances. Then where standard costing is used for control purposes, so in other words, where variances are calculated, which variances should be investigated? Because it's important to note that not all variances can be investigated, because this will be extremely time-consuming and also very expensive. So what happens is the company should establish criteria that they will use to determine which variances to investigate. And the following should be used as a guide. Firstly, the benefits of correcting the cause of the variance must outweigh the cost of the investigation. So if investigating the variance is going to be more expensive than the benefit that you're going to get from the investigation, then you shouldn't investigate the variance. So remember, we always look at the cost versus benefit in management accounting. Then in addition to that, you should only investigate variances that are material in size. So in other words, variances above a certain rand amount or above a certain percentage. So a company might determine that any variance above 50,000 Rand is material for them, so they will only investigate variances above 50,000 Rand. Or they might use percentages instead and say any variance above 10% will be investigated and anything below 10% is immaterial, so we will ignore it. But they should set a threshold and only investigate variances that are material in size. Then it's important to note that a variance might not be material in size for a certain period. So let's say we've calculated a variance, an unfavorable variance of 15,000 Rand for material this year, and the threshold is 50,000 Rand. We only investigate variances above 50,000 Rand. So this variance is below the threshold. It's important to note that if the variance is recurring and it indicates a steadily worsening trend, even though it's not material in size during this specific period, it should obviously be investigated further because it does indicate a problem over a number of periods. Then, you should only investigate variances which are controllable. If you have a random variance where there is no cause, that variance should not be investigated. So what is a random variance where there's no cause? Let's say, for example, work is performed by the same worker under exactly the same production conditions, yet a variance still arises. So that would be a random variance or an uncontrollable variance where there is no cause. And you shouldn't investigate these variances because the investigation will not yield any benefits because there is no cause for the variance. On the other hand, if the variance is under the control of management, so in other words, the investigation will yield benefits because it's under their control, then the investigation should result in appropriate corrective action being taken to avoid similar variances occurring again in the future. So, for example, let's say you find too much material has been used in the production process and there's excessive wastage. Then obviously the workers need to be better trained to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future. That is something that is under the control of management, and therefore an investigation would be worthwhile. Then lastly, it's important to note, if it is found that the variance is due to a permanent change in the standard. So let's say, for example, standards were set at the beginning of the year, and now halfway through the year, the price of material has increased. So there's a permanent change in the standard. The price of material has increased. Then you don't need to investigate those variances. You're going to have a lot of unfavorable variances because the actual price is going to be higher than the standard price that you set at the beginning of the year. So investigating those variances doesn't make any sense because the cost of material has changed. There's a permanent change in the standard. So if this happens, the variance should not be investigated, but instead the standard should be updated. Now you'll see when we get to our variance calculations, actual results are always compared to the flexed budget. When calculating variances, we never compare the actual results to the original budget. So what is a flexed budget or a flexible budget? It helps to obtain meaningful results by adjusting the original budget for changes in volume. So this ensures that the effect of uncontrollable volume changes on costs is eliminated. All right, let's go and have a look at the lecture example just to make sure that you're comfortable with this. When the original budget was prepared, management anticipated that sales for the year would be 10,000 units. All right, so you can see this original budget over here is based on the company selling 10,000 units. Now, in this example, we are going to be focusing on the direct material cost. So in the original budget, they have a cost of R2 per unit multiplied by 10,000 units, giving you a total cost of 20,000 Rand. Now, at the end of the year, sales were actually 12,000 units, and the actual direct material cost for the year is 21,600. So that's made up of 12,000 units multiplied by R1.80 per unit. Now guys, when calculating a variance, you can't compare the actual material cost to the original budgeted cost because output increased. Instead of selling 10,000 units, they actually sold 12,000 units. And if output increases, remember material is a variable cost. So the cost is obviously going to increase. So it doesn't make any sense to compare the actual cost to the original budget. So you can see that just below. When calculating the variance, the actual cost cannot be compared to the original budget. Output increased, so obviously the material cost will be higher than the original budget. So what do we need to do? Instead, the original budget must be adjusted to obtain meaningful results. A flexible budget should be prepared so that the effect of uncontrollable volume changes on costs is eliminated. So all we do, guys, is you take this original budget over here, which was based on 10,000 units, and you now flex that to what they actually sold. So you are still using all of the budgeted information, but this is now based on 12,000 units. because they actually sold 12,000 units. So you can see the selling price per unit is still the same as the original budget, the material cost per unit, the labor cost per unit, the variable selling cost per unit. The cost per unit are all the same as the original budget. However, the cost in total changes because we are not multiplying by 10,000 units, but we are now multiplying by 12,000 units. It's important to note, however, these two fixed costs over here. Remember, guys, fixed costs do not change with a change in volume. So when you are preparing the flexible budget, you'll see there is no change in your fixed costs. So only variable costs are flexed to actual production. Remember, fixed costs do not change with a change in production volume. So now we can calculate variances. When calculating our variances, we will always compare the actual results to the flexible budget. So we are comparing the actual material cost of 21,600 to the cost in the flexible budget of 24,000. So the actual cost is R1.80 per unit multiplied by 12,000 units. And in the flexible budget, it's R2 per unit multiplied by 12,000 units. So now we are being consistent. Both of these amounts over here are based on 12,000 units. And now you can see we actually have a favorable variance because the actual cost is less than the cost in the flexible budget. And that is because they actually paid R1.80 per unit instead of R2 per unit. So we have a favorable variance. So the actual cost of 21,600 should be compared to the flexed budget amount of 24,000, which indicates positive performance because materials were sourced at a cheaper cost per unit. So R1.80 instead of R2 per unit. All right. So this is a very important principle. You are going to see this coming across in all of our variance calculations, so don't make the mistake. We never compare actual results to the original budget. We always compare the actual results to the flexed budget. Now you'll see I have included a lot of formulas in your lecture notes. However, I don't want you to study formulas. Instead, I want you to follow a logical approach to all variance calculations. And you can see I have given you an example just below, but I'm going to work through the approach as I go through some of the lecture examples with you. From an exam technique perspective, please make sure that you always clearly indicate whether the variance is favorable or unfavorable. If you just give an amount and you don't say it's favorable or unfavorable, then you will not be awarded the mark. In addition to that, please also note that the terms unfavorable or adverse are used interchangeably. So you can either say unfavorable or adverse. You'll see also in solutions, sometimes they use adverse, sometimes they use unfavorable. Whatever you do, you will be awarded the mark.